Welcome back to Diaspora Glitch Podcast, where home is just never one place, but a patchwork of lived experiences, memories, and becoming. Today's conversation is beautiful in terms of landscape. I'm joined by Erica. Erica is a mother, an educator, and someone whose life journey stretches across continents, from Canada to United States and now to Netherlands. Erica's story is rooted in nature, family, and intentional living, but also courage, transition, redefining home, what home really means over time. Erica, I'm so happy to have you here today.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So, Erica, your life sits at the intersection of three countries across two continents.
Yes.
Let's start at the beginning because I always believe our first version of home shapes everything that comes after. You grew up in
I would agree.
Saskatchewan.
Yes, that's correct. Saskatoon, Saskatchewan.
Oh, Saskatoon. So,
Yeah.
Saskatoon,
Yes.
surrounded by nature, lakes, long winters, and family tradition. I mean,
Yeah,
can you take us there for a moment? What did home feel
sure.
like as a child growing up in Saskatchewan?
Yeah, so I grew up in Saskatoon, which is the biggest city in Saskatchewan. So, but pales in comparison to other cities I've been in now in terms of size. But there it's a large city. Both of my parents were from smaller communities. So my mom's town was about 15,000, and then my dad moved to multiple little towns. And so when we weren't in school and my parents weren't working, we always went to the smaller communities. So that's where we spent more time in very rural settings, or else also my mom's side of the family had a family cabin,
Yeah.
so we would spend time at the lake as well. So growing up when we were little consisted of, going to the babysitter,
Yeah.
going to school. We had to take a school bus to get to school because not all the schools are right in your
Yeah.
community. My parents thought it was important that my sister and I had a second language. So we went to a French immersion school, which meant we had to bus even through the long winters you mentioned.
Yeah.
So you'd be on the bus and all the windows would be frosted, so we'd make like fingerprints and pictures in the frost
Yeah.
on the windows on the way to school. Spending recesses outside, outdoor activities are important there. Even when it's minus 25 Celsius, the kids still play
Yeah.
outside. So yeah, an hour a day, putting on all your winter gear. And we had a skating rink outside at the school. We'd go skating at our lunchtime. We had a sledding hill, so we'd sled at lunchtime. And then when we weren't at school, yeah, like I said, we'd go to the lake and we'd swim and we'd go on walks and have campfires. And my grandparents loved gardening,
Yeah.
and so does my mom. So lots of time planting things, watching them
Yeah.
grow, that type of thing. Yeah.
Wow.
And time with family. So
Wow. I love that. I mean, Erica, it sounds like such a deeply grounded, connected upbringing. You know,
yeah, it was a great childhood.
yeah, I see. You
Yeah.
mentioned camping, gardening, even identifying few places that shaped your memories together with your family, which is so
Yes.
beautiful. Do you feel like that connection to nature still shows up in how you live your life today?
Yes, definitely. I appreciate nature a lot, and I understand how important it is to stay connected with it. I've also, as I got older, I became a teacher, and also seeing the way I could have struggles with a child in a
Yeah.
classroom, but then you take them outside and the struggles go away. They, are excited to touch the ground, maybe plant something, learn about different
Yeah.
plants, and those types of experiences are so important. So even today, that's been a big difference, North America to the Netherlands,
Yeah.
just the amount of space a person has to live in,
Yeah.
and the amount of garden space, that type of thing is certainly different. But it's still beautiful, just different. But yes, nature is still very important to me.
Indeed. And I have to ask, not everyone understands Canadian winters. I'm just
Yeah.
imagining growing up in such a cold and freezing environment, those long, cold
Yes.
seasons. Do you think they shape your resilience in some way?
Yes, I would say so, because you don't know any better. And so when you live there, you just know that from the time school starts, really, when you go back to school in September, because Canadians, at least in Saskatchewan and Alberta,
Yeah.
where I was, you start school after the September long
Yeah.
weekend, typically, or just at the end of August, and you have to prepare your kids for the school year by buying them winter clothes in
Mm.
September. So you buy them long pants, long sleeve shirts, you get a winter jacket, because it may be warm during the day, but already you often have freezing temperatures overnight
Yeah.
in September. And so by October, Canadians celebrate Halloween October 31st, and by then you often have snow. So you go trick or treating, but you wear full
Yeah.
snowsuits underneath your costume, because if you want candy,
Yeah.
that's how you have to dress. And then we often have snow all the way till May.
Wow.
We'll have warm days or warm stretches, but I call it like fake spring, because then you think spring is there, but it's not. And so you'll get another snowstorm, and you just are used to it. And like I said too, you still play outside.
Yeah.
You still have recess outside. The coldest I've ever experienced is minus 52
Yeah.
Celsius. That's the coldest.
Minus
And
2. That is
52, yep,
crazy.
52. And yeah, and you don't spend much time outside then, and you learn how to dress carefully, like as little skin exposed as possible.
Yeah.
But we still have school. School's not canceled, even if it's that cold, because the expectation is you know how to dress and be prepared for it. So, I do think, and driving in snow, that's just the normal. Everyone knows how to drive in
Yeah.
snow because there's snow 6 months of the year. So no one stays home on a snowy day.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy to see how people navigate this kind of harsh weather realities, still going about their daily activities.
Yeah.
Like the saying goes in the Netherlands, there are no bad weather, it's only bad dressing. Does that also apply to Canadian environment?
Yes, absolutely. And even we lived in Illinois as well, and they do get a lot more nice weather.
Mm.
I'd say it's more like a month of winter versus 6 months. But I definitely agree. There's no bad days, just bad clothing
Yeah.
choices. And there's certainly a difference in the winter weather gear that you
Yeah.
wear, even snow boots. They're not just like a boot.
Yeah.
They're created to prevent you from freezing. So certainly not fashionable, but warm. So I agree. There's no bad days. You just have to dress for it.
Just digress a little. It's interesting how the clothings are not just fashionable, but just to keep you warm. But across the Pacific, somewhere in Africa, many people see such dressing as being fashionable. You know,
Oh,
I remember growing up as a child in Africa, and when I watch movies and I see people, giddied up in winter dress, I go, "Oh, this is a bit fashionable."
oh,
But
yeah. A novelty anyway, right? If you haven't had to be in that
yeah,
weather, might look exciting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Speaking about Illinois, I mean, you later moved within Canada, but eventually to the United States with your family. And
Yes.
what I find interesting is the kind of move is not completely foreign, but it's
Right.
not fully familiar. What did that transition feel like for you and your family at the time?
Yeah. You summed it up perfectly. It was familiar enough to be comfortable, but different enough to be exciting. So there is still a lot to experience. We didn't really know what to expect moving there. Neither my husband and I had really traveled prior to moving there. And we'd never been to the city before. When we were offered the position in Illinois, my husband was offered the position. We asked if we could at least go see the city, because neither of us had really been to the States before. And I'm sure, similar to what you've seen on TV and stuff about the
Yeah,
States, I'd mainly only seen it in the movies, and so I wasn't sure what to expect. So we did go and visit, and yeah, so what's interesting is we felt quite at home, but we were still viewed as outsiders for sure.
really?
Like, yeah, so maybe not visibly, we didn't look like we were from somewhere else, but for 8 years, I was introduced as Erica the Canadian. Like, that was always, they're
Yeah,
like, oh, this is Erica. She's from Canada. And so
yeah,
that was always funny to me. And so it was similar, but there were differences. We were in a city of about 40,000 people, so a fairly small
yeah,
city. And so one high school for the public kids and one high school for a private
Yeah.
school. And then, so, like it was like living in an American movie. So like, Friday Night Lights where everyone goes to the football game, and even people that don't have kids on the football team are there cheering on their town or their city school,
Yeah.
and going to the grocery store, recognizing most of the people at the grocery store, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, it was neat.
I find interesting how you framed it. When you moved to the US, you were treated as an outsider. One would
Yeah.
think the idea of being treated like an outsider is defined by one's skin color.
Mm.
It is
Hmm.
surprising to hear that someone like you, and with obviously a white skin color, also felt you're being treated like an outsider in US, just a border
Yes.
away.
Yes. And so that was actually something I feel like we are put in the places we're supposed to be, and we experience what we do for a reason.
Yeah.
And I developed a much greater appreciation for the immigrant population, even though I don't look like a typical immigrant in the
Yeah.
US. It was interesting. It was almost like I was wearing costume, so they couldn't maybe see I
Yeah.
was an
Yeah.
immigrant, some people. And so I got true opinions sometimes, or I was parts of conversation before they maybe realized I was from somewhere
Yeah.
else. And that certainly wasn't the norm, but it did happen. And so it gave me a greater appreciation and understanding of, like you said, I look like I fit in.
Yeah.
And I still faced challenges.
Yeah.
And so it gave me greater appreciation for people that maybe do look more visibly like they've just arrived there. So that was definitely um,
Yeah.
an interesting
Yeah, I
experience.
mean, I think this is quite informative, and also it helps to create a shift in perspective, and especially when
Hmm.
you are in an environment where you constantly feel like you are being judged or authorized or maybe told what to
Right.
do and what not. And that's kind of perception creates a feeling of an outsider. To
Yeah.
see that such feeling also goes for someone like you helps to change how one thinks about you know how the world works. So it's an interesting
Right.
perspective. And you
Yeah.
went on to explore 25 states, which is incredibly, by the
Yes.
way, that whole
Yeah.
journey in itself. What stood out the most during the time? Was it the differences
Oh,
or the similarities or the
yeah.
multiculturalism? I mean, I'm curious.
Yeah, it was wonderful. So we drove most of them as well. Like we drove from Illinois all the way to the West Coast. And so we visited all the states along the way. And then we went, and then we came back on a different route so we could see more states.
Yeah,
And I would say a lot of similarities but through all of them. And also, but their own special maybe customs and
yeah,
traditions that are more specific regionally. So New Orleans, for instance, was like its own little world. It was a really cool place. More, although fairly big, it felt like visiting a friend's
yeah,
family where they're like, "Come in, let us show you everything. We'll feed you well. We'll show you a good time." And that was just like the overall vibe
yeah,
in New Orleans. And then, some of the more Midwestern were
yeah,
more, it's like that great home cook feel where you just kind of feel you're already at home
yeah,
and everything, like you said, is quite familiar. And then the further you go west, it felt the more connected people were with nature and the outdoors, kind of more like the forest and stuff.
yeah,
Whereas more Midwest, you're going to find more the like agricultural aspect,
yeah,
lots of farmers
yeah,
who know the land
yeah,
well and are in touch with the seasons, that type of thing. So a lot of similarities everywhere. Everywhere we went,
yeah.
we met good people. Yeah. So, um, yeah, it was nice.
This is really an adventure, and I was wondering. You sounded more to suggest that you were more acceptable in New Orleans than in Illinois. What did you
Mm.
think made the difference?
So I guess two things. One, the people in our own community in Quincy welcomed us very much so. So we were felt at home very quickly. And
Yeah.
like the community we lived in was, even I called our street, there was a family on our street, I called them my American family.
Oh,
Every holiday they had us over for dinner
yeah,
and we were included in so many things. And I made incredible friends, and our kids were welcomed
Yeah.
into their school and everything else. So I guess I more mean people that didn't know us once they found out we were from another country. That was like the only thing they
Yeah.
remembered about us. They'd be like, "Oh, they're from somewhere else." So, but in New Orleans, I think it is, I think one of the big things is I think tourism is really big there,
I
for one.
see.
So they're used to people being from everywhere, and so they're happy to show you, what makes them
Yeah.
unique.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big part, and then also, it's just a very laid back environment. Like, it was all about just being there and laisser les bons temps rouler,
Yeah.
like, let the good times roll. So and that's really what it was.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I like these adventurous experiences, even though it's more hospitable than maybe going
Yeah.
for hiking. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm curious, was there a moment where you realized, okay, this isn't just a move anymore. We are actually building a new version of home here.
Yeah. Definitely. I think one thing that was interesting because we moved with children. We've had children every time we've
Yeah.
moved. Like we had our son in Saskatoon, and then our daughter was born 2 months after we moved from
Yeah.
Saskatoon. So, and for my husband and I, we usually say 5 years. Like when we're making a move, we say, "Oh, we'll stay five
Yeah.
years." See what we're gonna
Yeah.
do. And Lloydminster, we stayed 5 years, and then we were ready for a change. But with Quincy, when we moved to the U.S., we were there 8 years,
Hmm.
and it was very comfortable.
Yeah.
We had put down roots. We could have stayed. I think we could have stayed forever, very happily.
Yeah.
We have wonderful friends there. We had a beautiful home, a really, really nice life. So it was probably, I don't know, within a year, we were like, yeah, this is really good. Like we're in a good spot.
Yeah.
So, uh, I think, yeah, it didn't take very long. Also, back to the kids, they were doing really well. Transitioning is difficult for
Yeah.
kids, finding all new friends. Our son, we moved to the States when he was transitioning into his first year of junior high,
Yeah.
and so sixth grade, and there were a lot of differences in Canadian schools and the way kids act and are still
Yeah.
kids versus the school he was going into. Fairly, they yeah, they act more mature maybe than they are
Yeah. I
there.
see.
No, yeah, and so that was a tough transition because he was coming in as a little
Yeah.
kid, and that's not the group he was moving
Yeah.
into. And then our daughter was starting first grade, and again, the differences between um, in Canada, you don't teach reading until first grade because the philosophy is kids' brains aren't prepared to be reading at
I
such a
see.
young age. In the States, they feel that you're behind if you're not reading in first grade. So right off the hop, she had to do special reading courses and stuff because she caught on very
Yeah.
quickly, but she wasn't doing it when we moved. So once we saw our kids were settled and happy, that was another thing that was like, this is good for
Yeah.
now. Like we're in a good
Yeah.
place. Yeah.
I see. This is really interesting experience. I mean, it's more like you already designed your own tour of the world, while also
Yeah.
meeting family life and professional obligations. I'm just wondering, in between this movement, what did you consider yourself as? Did you see yourself as a migrant or a global citizen? How
Yeah,
did you see
that's a good
yourself? Did
question.
you maybe sit back to think about what are you in these journeys?
That's a good question. I think I would have to say probably a migrant more than global citizen in the first move at least, because I think it was close enough to home. And so, really, the only thing that stood out were the differences, maybe, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
because there was enough familiar that really the only thing to notice was what was different. And so, it's pretty easy to say, well, that's not how we would do it in Canada, or well, that's different than what we would be teaching, and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So there in the States, although I felt at home, I would say definitely identified as like Canadian living in the US would be the way I would have
Yeah.
identified myself. And neither our family never had the desire to like renounce Canadian citizenship and become American, anything like that. We always wanted to continue to be
That
Canadian.
would you have
And
had?
then,
Would you consider that? I mean, if the option, I have the option was
no,
there, why would you not? I mean, everybody wants to have
uh,
an American passport.
not me. I think it goes back to, again, like, the idea, I would have to say, felt more like a migrant or a
Yeah,
visitor, a welcome visitor, by our
yeah,
community, but still a visitor versus that being home. I think after moving now to the Netherlands, I would say I still, especially because I don't speak Dutch yet or
yeah,
anything, I'm working on it, but I still certainly feel more like a migrant than this is home. But I think moving more towards the global citizen, where understanding more cultures, understanding how to, and just like appreciating that I'm part of a community. It's so much bigger than just, one
yeah.
country. And so that gives me more the global citizen feel that you're talking about.
Indeed. What I find interesting is how you also find yourself within the cultures that you moved in. And, coming back to the question I asked earlier, if you consider yourself a migrant, traditionally when the word migrant pop up in the media, it portrays people maybe fleeing their home country to somewhere
Right.
else to maybe take jobs or maybe in search of a better life. But
Right.
it is not
Yes.
very common to hear, this movement within global north. For example, from US to Canada or from Canada to US and maybe
Right.
Netherlands to Australia. Such movements
Right.
don't make the news. So that is why I asked, do you
Right.
consider yourself migrant? I mean, it is as a person.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I was thinking about that too, even before are having this conversation today, because all of our moves have been by choice and have been assisted by the company my husband works for, which makes it, none of them are mandatory, even
Or
necessary. And
pressure.
so yeah, we see an opportunity and we
Yeah,
choose to apply for it versus it being, to, like, for our family's
yeah,
safety or for our well-being or anything. And so in that way, I don't know, I wouldn't consider myself or our family a migrant family in those ways
yeah,
because we aren't. And so in that sense, we are certainly choosing to make these moves because of the desire to see more of the world, to understand more and to have experiences that will hopefully shape us and our children. So if we're looking at it in that capacity, I would definitely say more a global citizen than a migrant. But I go back to the fact that I think that I've gained such interesting
yeah,
perspective and better understanding of, very
yeah,
small though, of what an immigrant family would go
yeah,
through to transition and become settled in a different country, especially if it wasn't their
yeah,
choice in the first place, and it was out of safety or for a better life
yeah,
versus
yeah.
choice. Yeah,
I mean, this is really interesting and also profound conversations. As a Canadian, I'd like to ask, when you before you start you started adventuring with your
yeah,
husband, to live elsewhere. Canada is one country that welcomes a lot of people from different nationalities, so you have a lot of diversity and it's
yeah,
quite rich multicultural wise. What
yes,
was your initial perception about people when you hear they are coming to Canada perhaps to stay? What do you think about them
yeah,
initially before you yourself thought about the
right.
idea of moving around?
Yeah, so I don't think I'd given it much thought, to be honest.
See,
The elementary and high school I went to had a large population of first generation
yeah,
Canadians. And so because of that, I had the privilege of growing up with a real variety of people whose parents
yeah,
had all immigrated to
yeah,
Canada. And so it wasn't at all unfamiliar to me. And then also my favorite role when I started teaching, I was initially a French teacher and then I transitioned into special
yeah,
education. And the majority of my not the majority, but a large part of my role was helping children from other countries settle into our
yeah,
schools. And so I didn't really understand because I lived in kinda, I'd say, like an oyster,
yeah,
that I didn't necessarily understand all of the challenges other people from other countries were facing and why they would
yeah.
come to Canada, but, I mean, it's big. There's room for
Exactly.
everyone.
It's
So
quite
it
big.
really yeah. So I never really, yeah, I didn't really give it much thought. Like, if you're there,
Yeah.
alright, sounds good. Like, it never
Never crossed your
really
mind.
crossed my
Yeah,
mind.
I can
No.
imagine. But
Yeah.
it's good to know this, and I like to ask. In the course of your crisscrossing the US, did you still
Yeah.
carry on with the culture of gardening?
Yes.
keeping
So,
pets.
yeah, it was actually the town Quincy, the city we lived in was we were very fortunate to get a really cool
Yeah,
property. We had a lot of space. I loved gardening and I loved it there. And the like I was saying, I had my American family, so
yeah,
even things like the growing climate was different
yeah.
from what I was used to in Canada, much longer and more humid. And so my neighbor, I was telling him like I just can't get cucumbers to grow. And so he came over with a pack of cucumber seeds and he's like,
Yeah.
"I'll show you how to do it here." And so learning how to garden in a different way. And I have another friend who had a great garden. She lived on the edge of town,
Yeah,
and her biggest challenge was deer coming into her yard and eating her garden,
yeah.
but learning different foods like okra. I'd never grown okra in
Oh,
Canada.
you also have that in
Yeah,
Canada.
it just didn't grow. I'd never seen it grow in Canada before.
Really?
In the US, I grew great okra and she showed me how to grow it. So was yeah, so we ended up with a lot of garden spaces. We started planting fruit trees and we wanted to turn our yard into like an edible
Oh,
yard
yeah.
basically. Yeah, and then also we kept chickens. So we built a chicken coop and we had chickens and we did all of our composting and we're slowly turning our yard into clover instead of because it was a half an
Yeah,
acre. I don't know what acres translate to in meters, but so we didn't want just grass,
yeah.
to have to mow grass for the environment. So we were slowly turning our space into
Into
a
a green.
yeah, for animals too, because we had raccoons and foxes, and we had occasionally a coyote, and we had bats, and we had our pet chickens and hawks, and so we wanted it to be, and lots of like
Yeah,
songbirds. So we wanted it to be, yeah, a space for everything that should be living there. So it was nice.
yeah. Erica, one thing that really stands out in your story is how intentional you are about creating your environment. Gardens, fruit trees, animal keeping, and even restoring your yard to something more natural. And also good for husbandry. It
Yeah.
feels like homemaking for you is more than just living somewhere. It's
Yes,
something
I would
you
agree.
actively create. So I like to ask you, what does homemaking mean to you personally?
I feel like it with homemaking, it makes any space into somewhere comfortable that you
Yeah,
can you can live happily. And so I think that that's why it's so important because and to me the other main thing, you could I think put me anywhere and as long as I have the people that I
yeah,
love, I we can figure it out. And
yeah,
so and then you and then from there I think homemaking, like you said, being intentional in
yeah,
the activities that you do, the way you turn your space into something that you feel is
yeah,
comfortable. Even things like food preparation, taking the time to prepare food yourself and then you know the ingredients, where you hopefully you can know where you
yeah,
source the food from, those types of things. It makes me content. I think it's very important. And I think it also then, if you're missing something, for instance, like a specific food
yeah,
or a specific smell, you make those things
yeah.
happen too. So it makes transitioning easier.
Yeah, this is really interesting to hear. I'm just wondering, where does climate change impact sit in all of this? How does it, or how has it impact how you make, grow, and process these products?
That's a good question. Think well, like I said, nature is so important to me. So seeing the way that it is changing due to climate change is definitely something one needs to consider. And I grew up with like he was Canadian, so I don't know if he's well known elsewhere, but his name was David Suzuki,
Yeah,
for instance, and he talked about the way that we're basically driving to climate change is like driving towards a brick wall in terms of what we've done to the climate and we're too close to stop and not hit it at all,
yeah,
but we can at least slow ourselves down. And so if there are things that I can do to slow it down, I do. So, like whether it be in our last house, like I said, I was very conscious
yeah,
of the types of products I bought so that I wasn't adding to overconsumption or adding to unnecessary waste. I've been aware of, even since moving here, people telling me how the seasons aren't what they used to
yeah,
be in terms of more
yeah,
snow than
yeah,
common or an unusually warm summer, those types of things. So because we've moved, maybe I haven't seen or understood or been able to observe the changes as
Yeah,
much because I haven't been there long enough to know what it was
yeah,
before. But I think it gives people an opportunity to tell me about what it was like before. And yeah, people talk a lot about, seasons being
yeah,
different, or when we go visit for winter now in Canada, sometimes there's almost no snow. It's still very cold,
yeah,
but sometimes there's maybe a meter of snow instead of or less instead of, when we were little,
yeah,
sometimes the snow would be much
much
higher.
higher.
So, yeah. So I would say those are the
I'm
differences,
just curious.
things I've noticed.
Have you heard about climate migration?
Not much. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So my question there is, although jobs have been the central part of the movement, but growing up
Mhm.
in an environment where the winter goes as harsh as minus 52,
Mhm.
was there a time you considered moving to a place where you can maybe get more sun?
Not before we moved. So, growing up in Canada, I'd never thought, "Oh, I'd like to live somewhere where there isn't snow in the winter," or anything like that. But it's funny you say that because after living
Yeah,
places where winter is a month
yeah,
long, it's certainly when we talk eventually about moving back to Canada, it's cold. It makes me
I can
really
imagine.
yeah, and just even things like the plants I can grow, fruit trees that I can
Yeah,
grow, you can't there. It's just there are some that grow obviously, but not the
yeah,
variety and oh, some of the plants I can keep alive over the
yeah,
winter
yeah,
and things. So, it's certainly it's although it wasn't a deciding factor
yeah.
in originally leaving, it affects our decision for when we move back, I would say.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I like to bring it again back home. Do you think these practices like gardening or caring for animals help you feel grounded even when everything around you is new? You easily find yourself running.
I would Yeah, I would say you are 100% right. Even when we got the house we have now, where we're living, moving in, hadn't even unpacked boxes yet, and we have 2 garden beds in the
Yeah,
backyard, and I was out there pulling weeds, like, the second day I was here. And I bought plants before we even had the keys to our house and was putting them in the
yeah,
front bed as soon as I could, and I think it gives me a sense of home. And then our neighbors here have been wonderful as
yeah,
well, and my one neighbor introduced us to a community garden, and so, it was maybe a
yeah,
month after we moved here, and we were on our way to the community garden where they have chickens and pigs and sheep,
yeah,
and so I got to collect eggs like I was in Quincy again, and, I met really kind people and they welcomed me to volunteer there. So I would go once or twice a week and garden
yeah,
and yeah, it definitely helps me settle for
yeah.
sure.
And across all these moves, what would you say is the one thing that always stays the same in how you build home in foreign soil?
Yeah, I think for us, it's the people. We've been fortunate that in every move, our whole family has moved together. So our nuclear family has stayed the same. We actually also brought our pets all the way from Canada
Whoa,
and US as well. So we brought our 2 dogs and 2 cats. So our pug, she lived with us in
yeah,
Canada, in the States, and moved all the way to the Netherlands. And then we've had other animals come and go along the way as they've been old and died. But we've had, yeah, so we brought 4 pets with us when we came. So that too brings familiarity.
yeah,
And also, yeah, so I think, and then, not many objects because it was quite a long
yeah.
move. So not as many personal objects, but there are a few like back to homemaking. My grandma loved
Yeah,
cooking, and so cooking and baking. So I have her mixing bowls and those types of things. And so those kinds of things always make the move and just little keepsakes from
yeah,
different people and places.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so nice to see, and also very interesting to hear how your pets have also been part of this movement. I mean, in terms
Mhm.
of adaptation, did you notice any changes in them? You know,
Yeah, so the cats, this was their first international move, and so they had to fly for it was quite a long move actually for the pets, but so keeping some familiar smelling things I think helped for
yeah,
them to transition. And then our dogs were used to quite a large unfenced area, and so moving them here, they're
yeah,
small, but they still our new yard is all concrete blocks, and so they didn't know where to they're like, this isn't a
yeah,
yard, just they've adjusted now, but yeah, so it definitely and different, this our new
yeah.
house is multi-level instead of open. So they can't use the stairs, that kind of thing. So
Interesting.
definitely a change for them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
comes your most recent chapter, moving to the Netherlands. That's a
Yeah.
big shift. New culture,
Mhm.
new systems, new rhythm of life, new time
Yes.
zone. What sparked
Yeah.
that decision for your family? For your husband to even say, okay, I'm going to take the job offer, to work in the Netherlands, despite all this
Right.
shift.
Yeah. So before we even ever moved to the States, what kind of started my husband and I's conversations about big moves was the book The Alchemist. It's a book about chances being presented to
Yeah,
you and you needing to take them when they're presented. And if you choose not to, eventually the opportunities are going to stop presenting
I
themselves.
see.
And so, yeah, and so it was kind of a catalyst for us for like, what else do we want to do? Like, what's available to us, or what opportunities are presenting themselves? And so we were quite young. We were 25 and
Yeah,
26 when we started talking about like maybe we should move. Like where could we go? And I always thought Europe would be really neat. I even more so than the States. Or I was like, let's go to Europe. Where could we move? And so that was, yeah, 10 years ago now. And we decided more than 10 years ago. And we decided, well, first with the company my husband works
yeah,
with, it's first you move to the United States and then maybe there's opportunity elsewhere. So, like I said, we usually only spent about 5 years in a place. Quincy was very
yeah,
nice and very comfortable, so we stayed longer. But kind of back to the global
yeah,
citizen, our daughter and son, our daughter had lived the majority of her life in a fairly small community with not many multicultural
yeah,
experiences. And so our son had, he'd finished high school in the same
yeah,
community. So when and like I said, we had a very comfortable life, but unfortunately we were aware that a lot of people were not having as
yeah,
comfortable a life. And it became kind of one of those things. It felt a little uncomfortable to have everything so easy when other people are having things much more
yeah,
difficult. And it was also hard just with political changes because we, as immigrants, didn't necessarily, we weren't allowed to vote. We weren't really allowed to, if we weren't comfortable with
yeah.
something, it was like a tough line between what do you say, what shouldn't you say. So uh, when the opportunity to move to the Netherlands came up, we thought that that would be a really great opportunity.
Right.
Finally getting to Europe. And then also for the familiarity, we knew we could at least start off speaking
Yeah,
English and still be
yeah,
successful. Beautiful country. It's got lots of opportunity. Our son he's in mechanical
yeah,
engineering. So an opportunity or I guess automotive
yeah,
engineering, I should be clear for
yeah,
him. But yeah, all of those things together really influenced our decision. We were ready to experience
yeah.
more. We wanted our children to understand more of the world, and then also, and for us too. And yeah, and the Netherlands was
Was a perfect.
willing to
Yeah,
welcome us.
yeah. I see.
Yeah.
And what were your first impression when you arrived?
Yeah. Well, so one thing that happens in our family when we move, we typically don't all move at the same
Oh,
time.
I see.
For just to make the transition easier for everyone. So my husband, we found out January this year, or sorry, January 2025 that we were received the position,
Yeah,
and he moved in March. And so he moved here in March by himself and he lived here until May alone. So the kids and I were seeing kind of
yeah,
pictures and experiencing the transition through Tyler. And then when we got here, we arrived, our son moved next in
yeah,
May when he finished his year of university. And then my daughter and I moved after our school year was
yeah,
done. And yeah, so I guess the first impressions, life seemed more relaxed, I would
yeah,
say. Even things like kids on their
yeah,
own. going to the grocery store to grab something, and maybe their mom's on the phone and they're showing her,
Yeah.
like this product or this product, but and or maybe like a kid riding on their scooter through the
Yeah.
store, and that's fine, and it's, or else people relaxing and enjoying the sun, sitting outside and having dinner
Yeah.
together and walking everywhere, biking. So it just felt like a more relaxed
Yeah.
environment, which, yeah, was really neat. And also surprised by people's willingness to speak to us in
Oh,
English,
nice.
actually, was another, yeah, appreciated thing we learned. So, yeah.
And I'm just wondering, was there something particularly about having a nice environment for the children that also influenced your choice of moving here, rather than staying in the US?
Yeah, so when we first started looking to see if the Netherlands was a place we would be interested in moving, I just thought it was so nice to see how many people, everybody, one of the biggest things they said about the Netherlands was we feel safe. And whether it was safe to walk home in the dark, or safe to send your kids to the
Yeah.
park, or safe, just that was a theme that came up so many times. Another one was
Yeah.
free, like free to say how you feel about something, free to attend, or free to say your favorite
Yeah.
team or your
Yeah.
political affiliation. And so all of those things were really appealing for sure to us when we were looking at moving. Our kids are a little older. Our daughter is 14 and our son is 19. And so they do already have a bit, they're at the stage where they
Yeah.
are more free of us. So knowing that my daughter can take the metro and be
Yeah.
safe, that type of thing. So that certainly, yeah, that certainly influenced our decision too.
Yeah. And assuming the Netherlands was not an option, what would have been the alternative in Europe?
Well, in
Yeah.
Europe, it's funny. We've talked about that before. Like, where else would we move? And I think because our moves are so much assisted by my husband's
Yeah.
work, it would have to be somewhere that all of his jobs kind of rotate around
I see.
agricultural communities, or else ports. So that kind of influenced a lot of our ability to choose the Netherlands as well. And he also would have to be able to speak the
Yeah.
language in most of the positions. So again, the Netherlands was, I think, kind of, I would go for kind of everything that's on the side that we're on right now. I guess just again back for the
Yeah.
familiarity. And so that when there are a few things that are familiar, it makes, I think, the other things
Yeah. Less.
more
Yeah.
possible. Yeah.
Less challenging.
So,
And
right, yeah.
let's be real for a moment. What has been the most challenging part of settling into this new life?
Our son actually was not. So when we initially started the move, our son, because of his age, when we started, he was
Yeah.
17 and then he turned 18. And so we were told he would be able to move as part of our
Yeah.
family. And then when we got here, unfortunately, he was denied residency with our family. So within a month of us getting here, we were informed he would have to leave and move back to Canada because he wasn't allowed to stay with us. And so, which was very difficult, especially because, like I said, one of the biggest parts for us is that we all get to stay
Yeah.
together, and that makes everything easier. So he was already registered in school here. He had already arrived here, and we found out like a week before he was supposed to move out and start school in a new city that he was not allowed to stay.
And what
So our
exactly was the
options,
reason?
because he was 18, he was considered an
Mhm.
adult, so he couldn't move under my husband's
Yeah, I see.
working visa. And so we were faced with, how do we keep our family together? And we were told, well, he's Canadian, so he can move back to Canada, that's fine. But he hadn't lived there since he was
Yeah.
12. And so it's not really that familiar to him. We had planned to help him through
Yeah.
school and everything. And obviously we have family that would have helped us if need be. But that was certainly the most difficult part of moving here, was yeah, keeping our family together on the same
But
continent.
eventually you
So
managed to have him on board.
yes, fortunately his school was amazing and got him a student visa very quickly, even though we'd missed every
Yeah.
deadline because we didn't think we needed
Yeah.
one. So we hadn't they offered and we said, "Oh, we've got it covered. No, thank you." And then when we called them and told them what was happening, they were incredible and had
Yeah.
him at school on the first day of school with the correct visa.
Yeah.
So it was a relief for sure. And he lives an hour and a half from
Yeah,
us now, but that's much
yeah,
closer
yeah. I can
than
imagine.
another
Another
continent.
continent. But
Yeah.
also, what has surprised you in a good way about the country?
Yeah, I guess again, just the ease of, I just am very appreciative of how willing people are here to work with me, even if I don't speak the
Yeah,
language or, because even government, calling government, offices, they'll speak English to me and help me through any process.
yeah,
So that certainly has eased things. Also, transportation is incredibly convenient here. That has been something I've never experienced public
yeah,
transportation like this before. The ease of not having a car and getting anywhere you need to
yeah.
be, that was very nice initially. Um, yeah, I think those would be the main easy things.
Yeah, and in terms of finances, one would think that staying in the US would be better off because perhaps they have better pay. I mean, anybody watching this podcast would be, why would somebody leave US to come to Netherlands?
Uh,
It's high tax. I mean, what is
yes.
that experience like for you?
Yeah, it's been different for sure. I mean, I think one thing is because we are moving with a company, those
Yeah.
things are all discussed prior to
I
that. We're
see.
not
I
coming,
see.
yeah, so we're not arriving and then seeking employment once we arrive. Or my husband isn't anyway. So for me, like I've said, I taught for the first 13 or 14 years uh, of my career years. And then so coming here, that I guess has been
Yeah,
difficult
yeah.
too,
I
because
was
coming
coming to
here,
that. How was the? I mean, starting
yeah.
all over. I mean, was it like that for you?
Yeah, so for me it's I think more challenging, and again it's nice because we have the stability of my husband's employment role,
Yeah,
and so but no, for me I do definitely get to, that is one of the challenges when we move. I do start over in terms of employment. And so there are teachers
yeah,
everywhere, and that was one of the reasons I chose education. Was with my husband's career, I'm like, I could teach anywhere. So wherever we end up, I can
yeah.
teach. Not speaking Dutch, that is certainly a drawback here because it makes it more difficult to
Indeed.
get employment. So it's definitely a challenge. I have found a really great job now
Yeah,
though, so I'm very, yeah, fortunate that I did find a position
yeah,
here. But certainly a challenge. More so than I
yeah,
anticipated.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I can imagine not every woman would be willing to also make that sacrifice to support their partner. Does
Yeah.
that sometimes make you feel like you are losing some part of your person?
That's a good question. So, especially so when we moved from Canada, I was just finishing getting my special education degree. So, something I've been proud of as when I was younger, I we had our first child before we were finished university, actually before I even started university. And so we were young parents and went to school, got my first degree with while raising our
Yeah,
son. We were raising him, and then took a couple of years once, and then we had our daughter right after we finished university. So then I took a couple of years. I was teaching French and yeah, raising the two kids. And then I just thought I'd like something more.
yeah,
So then went back to school with the two kids, got my special ed certification so that I could be a special ed teacher. And then we moved, and I went, I'm not even going to get to use all the like all the education that
yeah.
I worked so hard to get. And so that was kind of, and in the end I did use it, but
Not.
I think it
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
I don't think it yeah, I don't think of it as like something that's unfortunate or maybe a disadvantage. I think it's more motivating to see like, okay, cuz not I don't think many people in our situation get the opportunity just to every 5 years, 8 years go, what do I want to
Yeah,
do? Cuz you're in a position and I could have done my job forever. I loved my job, my last job too. I was working in a very small school with
yeah,
students who weren't allowed to attend the regular schools anymore, whether it was because of behavior or attendance, those types of things. And I loved working in that position. So I'm sure I would have stayed for a very long
yeah,
time. But then it's someone, yeah, you're moving, so you say, well, what do I want to do? And you get to just decide fresh what you want, and that's pretty pretty incredible.
indeed.
So,
I
yeah.
mean, on this
So,
podcast, we often say that home becomes a patchwork of places. Do you
yeah.
feel like you are currently stitching a new piece into your sense of home, despite not
Yes.
fitting career wise where you expect to be?
Yeah. Definitely. And so I definitely would say I've got a Canada patch and I definitely have a Quincy patch from the States. I definitely have those two patches in
Yeah,
my quilt of home. Yes, I think currently we're very comfortable here. I wouldn't say home yet. It's still that exploratory phase where everything's still very fresh and new, which I think is really nice too because I think I get to look at the Netherlands right
yeah,
now through different
yeah,
eyes because, like I haven't seen spring here yet. I haven't seen summer.
yeah,
And so yes, I think it will become home. I think right now we're still getting through like that off phase where everything's new and exciting and kind of still feels like a
yeah.
holiday. But I do think again, I go back to I think we have every experience for a reason.
I see.
I'm not currently in a school setting, but I'm still in a teaching role in a
Yeah,
sense. And so with completely different people and
yeah.
everything. And so it's awesome. It's great. And so I get to still,
I
yeah,
mean,
meet lots of people.
interestingly, one thing with teaching is that you get the opportunity to add value to people's situation. And I get that also gives some level of sense of fulfillment for you in
Yeah.
that sense. Let's talk about motherhood, purpose, and identity as we gradually unwind. You've
Yeah.
navigated all these movements, career shifts, cultural transitions, while being a mother and an educator. And
Mm,
I just want to acknowledge that because this is a lot, it is also powerful. How
mm.
has this journey shaped the way you raise your children? I mean, what kind of future do you help them to imagine?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think one big thing that my husband and I realized really early was we cannot expect our kids to stay close to home, as they get
Yeah,
older, because we opened the world to
yeah,
them, and we showed them that like you can live
yeah,
anywhere. And if you want something, go. And so I think that that's a part. So as we've been raising our children, I think that that's a big thing, like in instilling in them endless possibility.
yeah,
Like if you want it, figure out a way to make it
yeah,
happen. It might not be easy, and we've experienced some setbacks and difficulties in the moves we've
yeah.
had, but just keep going. And so I think we've instilled that in our kids. Also, I think one of the things that I see in my kids that I'm so excited for is they don't just see people as like this is what a person
Yeah,
should be and this is what life
yeah,
looks like. And so understanding there's so many different ways of knowing, there's so many different like even culturally so many
yeah,
normals. There's not just one way of
yeah,
doing things. And so that's been very important for us. And then also being just responsible citizens wherever they are, that they are improving where they live, never like taking
yeah.
from it. And so, yeah, not taking more than they give. And so I think, and those things you can teach anywhere, like
It,
any country, any city, and and they transfer
yeah.
anywhere as well. So
I mean, I think this is a very interesting perspective, and I'm sure a lot of viewers will find it interesting. One of the challenges people do have with moving, especially if they have kids, is how they can juggle these two while still maintaining a certain identity for these children. My question
yeah.
then is, do you think growing up across countries changes how children understand identity, belonging, even what home means?
Yeah, for sure. I think even the idea that they just have to, similar as what I said with a career, they have to do with their lives, really.
Yeah,
Because they walk into a school not knowing a
yeah,
single person at all. They don't know even, like the teaching standards or what is or isn't
yeah,
acceptable behavior, just
yeah,
small things. They understand the bigger rules, but maybe some of the like the
yeah,
inexplicit, like the things that aren't really said out loud but just expected. So that's certainly a
yeah,
challenge for them. And yeah, so I think it is difficult because really understanding who they are. And so sometimes it is, like the same way I said, they're like, oh, they're the
yeah,
Canadians. That is kind of
yeah,
part of your identity is that you are from
yeah,
somewhere else. I hope that it doesn't it helps them understand that they can have friends and relationships with
yeah,
people everywhere and they can look different, but that they're still able really to connect to
it,
people because I think that is difficult where you don't maybe have all the same backstories with everyone that like the last city we
yeah,
lived in, most people live there a long
yeah,
time, maybe their whole life. And so they have backstories with other families, with kids since they were born,
Yeah.
you know, because their parents were friends before. And so our kids don't have that, which I hope it's not ever a detriment to them. Like we try to enrich their lives in
Yeah.
other ways and through experiences, strong bonds with our family, keeping connected with people from
Indeed.
former cities. Yeah. But that's certainly a difficult part.
Indeed. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And through your work in special education and also a trainer of family support, you are constantly holding the space for others. How do
Mm.
you stay grounded in your own sense of purpose through all this transition?
That's a good question too. I think back to the homemaking because that's something that never
Yeah.
changes. And so I think that's an important thing. Also, again, the gardens, that type of thing, it's something that I'm
Yeah.
passionate about, so I get to put myself into it. And then also the last city we lived in, I did a lot of horseback riding. So that was something for
Yeah.
myself that, and working on myself and improving in that way, that was always important. But also, this is a journey that my husband and I chose. Like we both made a choice to
Yeah.
do that. And so I think even though, like you said, I'm typically a supporter, like that's whether I'm supporting a student or a person or whatever, I am a supporter. But I think that that's also my intention. Like that's what I set out to do. And so I do feel like my purpose is fulfilled in that
Indeed.
way. Like that's what I'm wanting to do. And so I still feel, yeah,
Yeah,
fulfilled in that way.
interesting. Interesting to hear this. I mean, it's always nice to find responsibilities easy when you already acknowledge this as part of your innate qualities. I want
Yeah.
to close up with something reflective. If you had to define what home means to you today, not as a
Mm.
place, but as a feeling, what would you
Yeah,
say?
that is a good question. I would say connection. Yeah. I think that pretty much sums it up
Yeah,
because whether it's a connection to the community or the people in the people or the space, it's feeling connected,
yeah, uh,
I think
yeah.
is home.
Interesting. And finally, for anyone listening who is navigating change or even
Yeah.
hoping to move between countries or trying to find new footing in a new place, what would you want them to hold on to from your experiences?
That's a good question. I would say it, it will work out. What you wish for and what you work for, it will happen. But you just have to you can't sit and wait for it to happen. You have to keep on working towards it. But I think that that would be and reach out.
Yeah,
That's the other thing. When you need something, like it will happen, but it takes work and you have to be willing to reach out. And the last thing I guess is I heard this a long time ago. We're never alone and we're never the first person to do something. And but it's kind of like we walk
yeah,
through life backwards because everything we approach, it's the first time we've seen it, but there's someone else who's been there
yeah,
already. So we need to reach out and find the people who've already
yeah.
been there, who have experienced it. They know what to do. And then share that though, give that on to the next person. Be there and be willing to help the next person navigating that new thing.
Interesting.
So
And
yeah.
if you're watching up to this point and you have not hit the subscribe button, this is a time to do so. So you get up to date with our latest podcast series. Erica's story is such a beautiful reminder that home isn't fixed. It evolves with us. From Canada to new beginning in Europe, she shows us that homemaking is not about geography. It's about intention, connection, and the courage to begin again. Thank you so much, Erica, for sharing your journey with us today.
Thank you for having me. It was really
You're
fun.
welcome.
Much
You're
appreciated.
welcome. And to everyone listening, remember whatever you are in the world, you are allowed to create a home that feels like you. Until next time, this is Diaspora Glitch Podcast. Cheers.